Well, Irene, I was going to say, how many, you were a software engineer. So I was going to say, how many software engineers does it take to turn on, uh,
live streaming
live stream?
software? And
And
we're live right now, Brian. We are live.
I
So
know.
yes, it takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of people to prepare the platform, right?
No, you're supposed to say it takes zero software engineers. It's a hardware problem. You're supposed to say that. You're supposed to come back.
No. I see humans, Brian, everywhere, okay? And if you talk to me about automation, I will tell you automation is made by humans, for humans.
Yeah,
so this is not the topic of the today's talk, but thank you for bringing it up. So hello everyone. Yes, I'm Irene with SaugaTalks, and Brian Thomas here and we are hosting weekly Fantastic People Live. Yes, hello Brian, thank you for being here.
Yeah, welcome. And Irene, thank you. And this is exciting. Every week we get to have someone live on here, and we get nothing but great guests. So I'm going to let Irene introduce our guest today.
We have nothing but fantastic guests, and we're so privileged today because Dr. Jane Thomason is here with us. Hello, Dr. Jane, all the way from Australia. How are you today?
Good morning, Brian and Irene. I'm fine. Lovely to be on the show. Thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. I love the bright color today on you and bright color behind you. We're going to have very bright conversation, I hope, because Jane, I'm amazed. I'm amazed. You're an innovator. You're CEO. You're doing so much for social good, for public good, actually, right? We're going to link your profile, your LinkedIn achievements here in this video. This is amazing. So your top 100 women in crypto. Amazing. Welcome, Jane. So today we do want to talk about digitalization. So to me, digitalization, it is kind of a child of digital transformation, the word we overuse past year for sure. So how do you think we evolved as humankind going through what we've been going through?
Well, it's really funny, isn't it? But if you reflect on possibly the worst event that we've had in the last 100 years, the pandemic, it's actually been such an opportunity and such an accelerant for technology. And so it's almost as if some of those legacy curtains have fallen away. Some of the technology immune response that governments and leaders had been showing that made it hard to get traction for technology. And what we've seen during the pandemic is not just in healthcare, but in every kind of aspect of our lives and our living, that technologies just really move fast to enable us to survive the lockdowns, to enable us to track cases, to enable us to do interoperable data sharing so that we know what's going on with the pandemic, to protect the provenance of supply chains. So everywhere you look, technology has absolutely been accelerating and improving, and innovators all around the world have been pivoting their technology to help us with the pandemic. So it's kind of an extraordinary situation that the pandemic has actually brought us this terrific digital transformation at a rapid pace.
You're right, Jane. I know, and you and I have shared some airtime as well. What's I like to call the silver lining in the pandemic is the innovation and the advancement of the technology that we were put into use. And out of this, we saw so many kind human spirits helping out. But what's really interesting, before I turn this back over to Irene, is, Jane, you're still doing what you're doing before the pandemic. You didn't let this pandemic slow you down. You're still trying to help that bottom billion. And I really, really appreciate that.
No, I didn't slow down. I just stopped moving. So before I was flying around the world from place to place, and now I'm doing so many Zoom webinars and calls and discussions. But, it's interesting because people have become a lot more accessible. So one of the things, if you think about it, before the pandemic, there were so many, prominent speakers and thinkers that you'd have to pay thousands or hundreds of dollars to go to a conference to hear, and you definitely couldn't talk to them. The pandemic's kind of opened up the availability of all sorts of people, thinkers and speakers, to a much wider group of people for free. So I think that's another benefit that I've seen during the pandemic. But yeah, certainly I've done more Zoom calls than I care to mention. all around the world, just keep on going, because there's so many important things to do, so you can't stop, and technology enables us to connect and discuss it and share ideas and encourage good projects.
Absolutely. And Jane, what you do for what Brian referred to bottom billion, that's an interesting concept. So could you please give us your point of view on this digital divide? Because we are privileged ones, we have access to all this technology. Okay, so how did humankind react to, now it's the air we breathe, right? Without internet, you pretty much excluded from a lot what's available to the rest of us. So how do you assess that? Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to kind of answer that in two ways, because, I acknowledge completely within our own countries and with many of the emerging world countries, there is a huge digital divide. So there are people who don't have access, and there are people who still live in, poor and difficult situations. But this is improving. I mean, if you think about it, 70% of the world's population now have access to mobile technology. And that is a huge game changer, particularly, for people who haven't been connected to the economy before. And if you think about it, if you have a mobile phone, you have access to information, you have access to the economy, you can receive money on your phone. And I think the other big development that I've been impressed with this year is the development of very, very cheap mobile devices that can do voice activation, because many of those people in the bottom billion, of course, are illiterate, which means that a smartphone with words and icons and so forth is going to be difficult for them to use. But if they have voice controls in their local language and education in their local language that they can receive on a $10 small device, then this really starts to democratize information and knowledge. And I think that we're going to see very, very powerful changes taking place. And we already are. Because there is a term, it's still in use, but I think it's really outdated now. People talk about the unbanked, and there's 2.5 billion unbanked in the world. But what do you need a bank for now? If you've got a mobile phone and you can send and receive money on your mobile phone, you don't need a bank. And so I think the changes that are taking place simply through mobile technology are immense. And as internet penetration increases, and as people think about how to overcome some of the challenges to mobile technology, so even that, you still need access to electricity to charge your mobile phone. And yet people are now innovating with very, very cheap solar panels and allowing villages to sell micro amounts of solar energy to people to charge their phones. So overcoming that problem. And then I'll just mention Electronium, which is a crypto project which is really aimed at that bottom billion. And so they've now done deals with mobile phone companies so people can receive mobile phone credits in exchange for ETN, which is their token. So people are finding ways to innovate using technology in very, very simple ways for those people who are at the bottom of the pyramid.
I love that, Jane. And we're seeing it today, just several years, not even several years ago in China, in the remote areas of China, it was cheaper for them to build cell towers than to run, your traditional copper out there, right? Or your fiber optic, rather. But all this stuff, the crypto, the blockchain, the technology, the stuff that you talk about all the time, this is absolutely, if you think about, Jane, and I'm dating myself, but if you think about the 80s and the 90s, right? I thought technology was moving pretty quickly, but now it's hard to even stay up. There's so many little startup unicorns, like you said, the charging of cell phones. Now they've got stuff that you can set up a little wind funnel and it charges your phone. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So that's awesome. That is awesome. Irene, what's your thoughts?
My thoughts, Brian, on this is that it's amazing how many countries are actually leaping towards different technological age. because we here in the United States, we kind of cursed with older infrastructure because we are innovators, or at least generations ahead before us, right? I came to this country 28 years ago, so I very much could appreciate at the time, okay, how much Soviet Union was behind, okay, at the time that we were growing up and studying computer science and technology. But at the same time, there are lots of countries in the world, and maybe Jane, you can comment on that those who can leap from, let's say, right, from earlier days towards the futuristic days. That's something where what we're lagging right now in United States, and a lot of infrastructure, I would say, right, investments. So what do you think, Jane, how those countries I actually improving their...
Look, I absolutely think we're going to see a real growth of innovation coming out of the emerging economies. And, you know, Brian, you mentioned China, and there's no doubt China is miles ahead. And it's absolutely fascinating to see what they're doing with digital. And I was in China at the end of 2019 at the World Internet Conference. And, you know, it just kind of blew my mind to see their technology companies. There was a big expo and so forth. And the way that their leaders were talking about internet and the importance of the internet for essentially eradicating poverty from China. And they're really interesting from that point of view, because they're essentially rallying everyone to stop poverty in China. So, you know, Tencent had a day where no one gave more than $2 of every transaction that they did on Tencent, and they raised tens of millions of dollars, you know, for public welfare, which is what it's called in China. And so there's a lot of incentives for companies to do things for public welfare, which I think is really interesting. But then moving on to other countries, I'm seeing innovation all around the place, because for us, and I talk about places like Australia and the United States, we've got pretty good systems. We've got a lot of people who are very invested in those systems and their place in those systems. So they're going to resist change. But if you're in a country where you don't have systems and you don't have service, and some new technology comes in that might solve a problem that you've got, you're going to go straight for that and embrace it and then use it. So I think, you know, in countries like Nigeria and Indonesia and India and Brazil, we're seeing tremendous innovation very, very fast, because it's solving problems that people have got now. And we saw that particularly, you know, during the pandemic with remittances and payments and those sorts of solutions, but also even with crypto, because people were at home and people started playing with DeFi and figuring out how to make money out of DeFi, for example. And I thought it was really interesting. We Are Social 2020 put out their report, and they report on everything to do with technology and mobile penetration and who's using what social media. And for the first time this year, they put out the percentage of the population that own crypto, and the top 10 countries are all in emerging economies, Brazil, Nigeria, and so forth. Really, really interesting, because they're using it to solve problems that they've got. And I think that's the key. And we're just a bit too complacent and comfortable, and we're going to be overtaken, I think.
Fantastic. This is a good segue, Jane, to talk about your book. Okay, I'm impressed. The title of that book, Blockchainging the World. People, if you're listening to us, it's available on Amazon. So, Jane, how did you come about writing the book? I know you do a lot of research around blockchain, but it's a different story, right? We all consume the content. So how did you, come up with the idea?
Well, look, I actually got together with a couple of colleagues earlier and wrote what I would say is a serious book about blockchain and social change. It's called Blockchain for Global Social Change, published by IGI. And that was really a very serious attempt to try and share with people how blockchain is going to be able to make change in healthcare, in supply chain, in humanitarian settings, and in various others. But Blockchanging the World was different in the way that the blockchain community, the pace of change, the extraordinary futuristic ideas that people have got and what they're doing, and then the weird and wonderful characters of the blockchain community and the ICO phase where companies were raising billions of dollars on an idea with nothing much else. It was just such an incredible experience being part of that since 2016 that I wanted to share some of the stories, some of the thrills, some of the excitement, some of the characters, and what had been going on and what was my experience during those years. But all of it, with my own view, I said blockchanging because, many of us were all trying to change the world, but I just wanted to kind of add blockchain because I do think it's such a transformative technology. So it's really a bit of a whirlwind story of 2017 to 2020 with the rapid change and some of the amazing projects in the blockchain world.
I love that. And Jane, if you don't mind, I'm sure you don't, but I'm going to give you a little plug. You've got a popular op-ed on the Coruzant platform as well. It's called Blockchanging the World, and you've written several great pieces about how we can transform, again, the bottom billion or those in Indonesia, India, and beyond. So thank you for that, and you're just an amazing writer. You really are. So thank you.
Fantastic. So congratulations. Yes, much success, Jane, with the book. So we did announce that we're going to talk about micro business today, right? So we talked about pandemic, overall penetration of digital technologies, right, in different societies. So what do you think micro businesses, how did they benefit, or maybe they experienced some challenges?
So I want to share two stories with you, and I think both of them are really interesting, and I imagine that they're indicative of what's been happening all around the world. And the first one, which I love telling because it's just such a great little story. I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a blockchain remittance company in the Philippines, Luis Buenaventura. His company's called Bloom Solutions, and it's been going for a number of years. And I was saying, what's been happening during the pandemic? What have you seen? And the first thing that he had seen, and you'd expect it in the Philippines, was a real rise in people using their company for remittances because Philippines has so many migrant workers. But he told me another story that I loved, which was of small micro entrepreneurs in villages who make their money out of selling things like Netflix and Spotify cards. And Philippines has been pretty much shut down for a year, which includes the local village cash exchange shops. And so these micro entrepreneurs couldn't get access to foreign exchange to buy their Netflix and Spotify cards. So they started using Bloom Solutions, the crypto remittance providers, so that they could send very small amounts of money so they could continue to get their Netflix and Spotify cards and sell them. So, they were kind of innovating to solve their problem. And the other one, we had a wonderful conversation a few weeks ago with a group of women in Indonesia during International Women's Week, talking about women's small and micro businesses and what had happened to them during the pandemic. And a little bit the same story, because everyone got locked down. They then had to go digital really quickly so that they could still continue. Many of them were food vendors, or they may have been selling crafts or other sorts of things. And so how they learned to go digital, how they, again, it's kind of that digital divide, because while some of them might have had access to mobile phones, they didn't know how to use them to trade or to get on platforms that would allow them, to be able to buy and sell things. And so how many of them used, other people almost like coaches or tutors to come and show them how to use their mobile phones so that their businesses could go digital. And many of them, have made that transformation and continued to operate their businesses from home. And of course, it's a bigger challenge for women because they also have the responsibility in the house of looking after the children and making sure that the food's prepared and so forth. And their ability to continue to run their businesses using mobile has been really widespread and quite profound. So it was a great conversation and really good to see how quickly people were able to do it if they had access to a mobile phone.
You're absolutely right. It's interesting, Dr. Jane, the the innovation that's happening just in the Philippines that I've seen, and I was personally there, but a long time ago. We'll talk about that later. But it has really, while I still agree with you, they're still struggling over there. A lot of it is, especially in the villages, but they've come a long way. There is a lot of companies that have partnered or had a strategic relation or outsourced some of their call centers and technology to the Philippines right now. And I'm seeing more and more of that. Traditionally we've seen maybe India, but I'm really seeing the Philippines kind of stepping up and being part of that global market right now.
But I think the key point about all of this is if we can get people with some basic digital skills in any country and they have an internet connection, they can sell those skills anywhere from where they are. And again, I'm going to mention Electronium again because I think they're such an interesting company, but they've had, I think, more than 4 million wallets downloaded around the world, and most of them in developing countries. And they started up a marketplace called AnyTask now, which is virtually free. So it's not like Airtasker and other ones that take a significant percentage of the transaction. So people can sell whatever they have and offer it into the marketplace. And you're seeing a similar thing now being developed with another project called Good Dollar. And I don't know if either of you are aware of it, but this is the founder of eToro's idea about creating universal basic income. So anyone with a mobile phone and a connection can go on Good Dollar every day and get their good dollars. And so what they seem to be doing, and I get my good dollars and see what's going on. And so after some months, now they've introduced a marketplace. So that means that I can have a look and see what people are selling on the marketplace and use my good dollars to pay people for doing things. So I think this kind of formation of communities and marketplaces is going to be a really interesting way to connect people to the economy wherever they are.
Fantastic. And we also claimed we're going to talk about inclusivity. So I think we're very close to that topic. Last week, I spoke with Terrence Mills. He is the CEO of AI company here in US. And Terrence brought interesting point that even for US to compete and to really attract talent, tech talent, any kind of talent, you have to open up. You have to be more inclusive. You have to find talent where you didn't think you can find talent yesterday. So what's your point? Jane, what's your point on this? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest shortages, and I have conversations about this every day, is where do you find great developers, whether blockchain developers or software engineers? They are in tremendously short supply. So I think some of the most exciting ventures that I see are the ones that are in Africa, and one that I often speak about because I just love the boldness of their ambition was Code Lagos, who said they're going to train 1 million coders in 5 years. And so where the skills don't exist, they're giving people the skills. And I was also on another call into India with a software company that's won the contract to develop the equivalent of India's Zoom. And I thought they were really interesting because they were saying, look, we don't actually care if people have got an engineering degree or have been to university. We're looking for some specific skill sets. So if people come to us and say they've got some developer skills, then we give them a challenge and a time frame and we see if they can do it. And then we give them a chance. And so we kind of allow them to grow and develop within our company, and we're not so worried about qualifications. And I think we're going to see more of that because I've met so many self-taught developers who just got on the internet, watched some videos and got on GitHub and basically taught themselves how to code. So I think that kind of how education happens to train people with digital skills will change. And I know a lot of the big companies who are looking for developers are developing like teaching through gamification to attract developers to their platform, to learn how to code on their platform. So definitely those kinds of skills are in very short supply, and experienced developers can command really high salaries. And if you can find people, in developing countries who can learn these skills and then sell them, it's a huge opportunity for everyone.
Absolutely, I cannot miss the opportunity. Brian knows my story. I am the self-taught developer. Okay,
Oh, wonderful.
I am the one. I mean, I had a degree, I had a good education thanks to my family and everyone. But the point is that I knew nothing about programming when I came to this country. I could not speak English. Okay, but somebody gave me a chance, and there was a wonderful company here in Connecticut. They took a chance on me, on young graduate from foreign university they never heard of. Okay, who barely speaks English. That was me. I'm still, yes, have my accent, but at the time I couldn't communicate well, but with a lot of interest, with a lot of, eagerness, to get on board. And I was self-taught because I opened up the book and I spent a couple of months, picking up SQL skills. So at the time it was very profitable back in the 90s. So I built my family, I raised my family. So all I'm saying is I'm a walking example that this is possible. All right. And if anything, message to the companies who are hiring all over the world. Okay. Like, look beyond your ideal candidate. Throw away these resumes that you think they're filling some profile. It's not about that anymore, right? There's talent out there. Brian, yeah. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I can even take that and jump in. There's a lot of things that I've done as a developer, self-taught in some areas. And it's all about, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to show a little initiative, those are the time. And I've hired hundreds of technologists and developers and so engineers in my career as a technology leader. And I can tell you, it's not always the degree. It's not always that awesome resume. It's the person that rolls up their sleeves, he or she, that takes initiative and wants to jump in and contribute. And that those have been the best employees I've ever worked for, bar none.
I think it's about attitude and potential. And the other thing that I wanted to add, because I just think this is the beginning of the new world, which is where we move from a jobs-based economy to a skills-based economy. And I think that the days of we do a 3-year liberal arts degree or whatever kind of degree it is, they're going to be gone, because employers are going to go, I actually need someone who can do this specific thing for me, and I want to hire someone who's got that skill, not just some sort of general education qualification. And I think that university training is going to be extremely disrupted. I think people are going to be taking micro courses from all around the world, whatever professor they want, anywhere. I think we're going to have borderless education, and very much around teaching people very specific skills rather than these kind of broad-based degree programs that we've grown up with.
Absolutely. And what I hear is changing. The whole economy going to be freelancers economy. Yeah. Don't you think, right? This employment, this lifelong employment, okay, it's dead by now, but it's not going to be even full-time employment. So take that, right? Flexibility and inclusivity. Do you see this happening, Jane? Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. And I think the tragedy for me is that our education system is not training our children for this future. It's still training them for the last 50 years, not the next 50 years. And I pray that parents are not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars sending their children to train to be accountants and lawyers and things like that, because, these are professions that are going to be highly disrupted by technology. Mm-hmm. And the expectation that someone will get a degree and go and have a job for life, I think, is going to be blown out of the water. So we need to teach kids agility. We need to teach them resilience. We need to teach them those soft skills that computers won't be able to take over. So, I really hope that the education system is going to also transition to prepare them for that. But I heard a TED talk the other day from Salim Ismail, who's from Singularity University, and he was talking about the kind of immune response to these new technologies. And he's saying, if you want to disrupt education, then the teachers' unions are going to come for you. And so I'm not that hopeful about where this education disruption is going to come from, because so many people are invested in keeping the education system the way that it is. But, I have a granddaughter now, she's 3 years old, and I worry about how she's going to be prepared for the life that she will be living.
You know, I have some optimistic message out there, okay? No one prepared me for the life I'm living right now, okay? Nobody thought that I will cross the continent, the ocean, all the way from Russia to United States, you know, that I will be speaking another language like it's my own, that I will be loving another culture that is my own. So yeah, we are very complex creatures, human beings, okay? We're able to achieve so much. Again, not like that I completely deserted my culture, you know, I was born to. It's different, but we can combine, we can converge. You know, that's the beauty of us human, right? And those soft skills we have, the empathy, the ability to, right, to resonate, you know, in our hearts to things that we worry about. So good. Jane, we did not talk about healthcare. We spoke about digitalization and even human aspect of it all. So is there something we want to kind of send the message out on where do you think the future of digital health tech will be, or how that...
I think we're just going to have to do another conversation. I think that's too big of a topic to just get out in the last minute of a podcast. But I'll be happy to come back and share with you some of my thoughts about healthcare. Absolutely.
Sure. It's a deal, Jane. It's a deal. They say here in America, okay? So next time, it's all about healthcare, and absolutely, and health tech evolution then, Brian, anything in closing? Fantastic.
I think back to, we were talking about, you know, kind of not assimilating, but finding our own way, right? As disruption is coming to education, I think it's our responsibilities. We're the stewards. We know what's coming. We know what's out there. Is we need to get the message out. And I think platforms like this is going to help. You know, there's a great webinar, and again, I'm putting a plug in here for another guest that was on my show. Jeff Wald, he wrote a book about the end of jobs and the demand of, or the growth of on-demand workers and agile corporations. And literally, there's going to be a lot of freelance going on. Jane, you and I might be working for 4 different companies, you know, that sort of thing, right? So it's something that is coming, but back to what I was trying to say is we should get the message out there. And you're right, there's going to be a lot of people that just don't like change, and they're going to try to keep their heels in on this traditional education. I think it's time that people understand that there are other options. Sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And no, I mean, I think we are the agents of change. And technology gives us our voice, and we are using it, and we should continue to use it to help people understand and come along and see the opportunities.
Absolutely. Jane, thank you. Thank you so very much for this talk. I enjoyed it immensely. Brian, thank you for being my wonderful co-host. So please tune in, audience, tune in. We're here on Fridays, so at 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we are on different schedule, but yes, please join in. We will have fantastic conversation, and Jane is going to talk to us about healthcare next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.